Okay, hello everybody. Our next text for this Unit 4 is Blocking the Transmission of Violence by Alex Kotlowitz. Fascinating article. Hopefully you enjoy it. How do we block the transmission of violence when so many times violence is expected in society and in culture, and to not commit an act of retribution, sometimes violently, we're seen as weak, as Hamlet sort of was seen as weak by those around him in the Shakespeare play we just finished. Okay, so a few of the themes we see here in Kotlowitz's article is how do we avoid retribution, okay? Especially in a violent country like America where gun violence is so common. Another theme would be how do we treat violence? What's the best solution or treatment for all of it? The third theme we'll look at is whether using ex-felons is a proper solution for stopping the transmission of violence or blocking it. 4, we'll talk about reconciliation and apologizing for violence. Can we do that? And 5 is the vicious cycle. Things that move in cycles are almost impossible to stop. If it is a cycle, maybe it's a lost cause. So we'll talk about that last. So first of all, we direct your attention to the first page, 379. And we see that Martin Torres gets the awful news that his nephew was shot in Chicago, so he goes to Chicago. And he says, line 9, I thought, man, I'm going to take care of business. That's how I live. I was going hunting. This is my blood, my nephew. So his reaction was to get the guy who shot his nephew. We also see on line 49 that Luke Hodenbach, who works for the Ceasefire nonprofit group as an interrupter, he tried to talk Torres down, line 49. He tried to talk him down, telling him retribution wasn't what his brother wanted. Torres says, I didn't understand what the hell he was talking about. Okay, so for Torres's brother, the father of the nephew who was killed, he would rather not commit retribution or revenge. And Torres, coming up from Texas, didn't understand that kind of logic. Okay, we also see on page 381, line 68 through 70, 68 through 81, I'm sorry, we have a brief exposition about homicide rates in America. Some places like New York, there's a remarkable amount of gunplay continues to plague economically struggling minority communities. For 25 years, murder has been the leading cause of death among African American men between the ages of 15 and 34, according to the CDC. So yeah, that's huge. Number one, death of anyone aged 15 to 34 is horrible, premature. But the fact that this is the highest rate for this age group is gun violence is also disturbing. We see finally, on the theme of retribution, we see in line 146, page 383, we've seen in line 146, Janelle Sales prodded the guys with egged cars to go to a car wash and then persuaded them it wasn't worth risking their lives over a stupid prank. So here is a situation where somebody had their car egged and they were going to reply with violence. The obvious response to the prank of having your car egged is anger, bitterness, but is it really that serious that you'd have to go shoot somebody? Probably not. And again, if this is a cycle of violence being transmitted, shooting someone for egging your car is just simply risking your own life over your car being egged. So it's a little bit of a no-brainer when you think about it. You don't want to put yourself in harm's way over a stupid prank. Okay, so those are the examples of retribution at the beginning. We saw how, on the same page 383, we saw how violent some communities are in Chicago. The example here, 18 students had been killed in the first 3 months of the year when this article was written. So the next theme we want to talk about is this Dr. Gary Slutkin, who started the ceasefire group, is an epidemiologist. His job is to find epidemics of disease and to stop them. He'd been to Africa, fighting AIDS in Africa, and he came home to Chicago, his hometown, and he decided the best way to treat gun violence in America was to treat it as though it were a public health problem, not a moral problem where there's good people and bad people killing each other. But he said it's just simply a health problem. So we see on page 89 to 90 that paragraph about that I just summed up for you. And then we go to line 171 to 182. In 171, he talks about usually if gun violence is treated as a public health problem, he says one focuses on environmental factors, line 172, specifically trying to limit gun purchases and making guns safer. The other tries to influence behavior by introducing school-based curricula like anti-drug and safe sex campaigns. So those two ways to stop gun violence, to limit the sales, make them safer, and to teach at school to stop using guns, he claims don't work very well. But if we treat it as a disease, he thinks it'll work better. And the way to do that is to alter behavior, he says in line 181. He hopes to alter behavior in what's considered socially acceptable. Okay, and then he goes into this long example of TB or tuberculosis in San Francisco, and how what he did was he got the communities that were suffering terribly from TB, he went and got the people who were infected tested, and he got family members to be tested too to stop the spread of TB. So what happens here is Kotlowitz will transition into going into the cities where gun violence is epidemic. And just like you'll go to the place with tuberculosis or HIV and test everybody and treat them, his thesis is we have to go into the inner cities and to treat the people who are resorting to guns to solve their problems. Okay? And so that brings us to our third point, and then we'll take a break. The third point is, should we bring the men and women who have been in violent communities, should we bring them out of prison or after they've been let out of prison and send them back into the communities where they used to live? Is that a logical solution? Some of the problems we saw happen when some of them relapse into that lifestyle. One of their workers ended up getting caught with an AK-47, we saw in line 305. Sometimes the police are too closely associated with these ceasefire interrupters, and the people who need help don't get help because they're suspicious of the non-police interrupters. So Slutkin admits that it was a problem in line 295 at a meeting with civic leaders. Slutkin never mentioned that the interrupters were ex-felons. When I later asked him about that omission, he conceded that talking about their personal histories is a dilemma. I haven't solved it. So it's still debatable whether sending people who used to be gangbangers or used to be violent criminals should actually help to stop this kind of behavior. It seems to work to a certain degree. It's a case-by-case basis. Okay, so we'll talk a little more about this great article by Kotlowitz in a little while. I'll take a break now, and to review again, the first quarter of the article is about retribution, retributive violence. The second part is about how violence is a public health issue in America because it is killing so many people. And then the third one is whether it's worth it to hire ex-felons to help stop the transmission of violence. Okay?